Every week, so much happens in your own country that it's hard to keep track of the news at home, let alone around the world. So in the next 8 minutes, I'm going to walk you through some of the week's biggest news stories, but we'll be moving fast. So if you want to find out more about any of these stories, then there's article recommendations in the description. This week's biggest stories include Trump's return to politics and a potential 2024 run, Europe hitting back at Hungary's anti-LGBTQ+ laws, and the French and Ethiopian elections. Before we start though, make sure you're subscribed and ring the bell to be notified every time we put out a new global news video. Thank you for your support. We've spoken a number of times on this channel about China's increasing influence over Hong Kong and the changes that are being made because of it. One stark example of this happened last week when Apple Daily, the city's largest pro-democracy newspaper, published its last issue, in reaction to the arrest of their editor and other staff for writing articles calling for sanctions against the cities and China's government. These arrests have continued since the paper's closing too, with one senior journalist arrested yesterday when trying to leave for the UK. This is far from the only example of China's crackdown and use of their new security law, but it's saddening and worrying to see such a shift and the departure of a pro-democracy news outlet. Speaking of democracy, many people in France headed to the polls last week for regional elections. These elections, while important to their regions, aren't all that significant on the global scale. But the way that electors cast their ballots could indicate how the country is feeling ahead of their all-important 2022 federal elections, where incumbent President Macron faces tough opposition, most notably from Le Pen's populist anti-immigrant national rally. Midterms are famously bad for incumbents around the world, so no one expected Macron's LREM to win any of the elections. But few expected them to do so poorly that they didn't win their deposit back in 2 out of 3 races, getting only 11% of the vote across all 3 regions. Now, we explained all of the factors behind this in our video linked below, but it's clearly bad for Macron heading into 2022. However, his opposition, the National Rally, also did poorly, with Le Pen even going on TV to seemingly scold voters for their apathy, encouraging voters to show up and make history in the second round of voting, which took place on Sunday. The results of which we don't have yet, at least at the time of recording. What do you think though? Is France headed towards a Le Pen presidency, or will Macron be able to hold on? The people of Ethiopia have also been voting in the last week, with the troubled country, one we've discussed a handful of times before, electing new parliamentarians. This election has proved very controversial though, with opposition leaders arrested and as many as a fifth of voters disenfranchised. This disenfranchisement was so substantial that in 4 of 10 counties, people weren't even able to vote. This was down to ongoing conflicts and misprinted ballot papers, at least according to the government. As such, the results are expected to be good for the incumbent Prime Minister, with many opposition parties even boycotting the election. But it's certainly not good for the country. Some of you might have seen our recent video on global alliances. If not, it's linked below. But one of the alliances we didn't have time for, the Southern African Development Community, took some serious action this week, sending the SADC standby force to support Mozambique. These troops will assist in the fight against escalating violence in the north of the country, where 3,000 people have been killed and 800,000 forced from their homes since the conflict started in 2017. Current reports don't show how many troops are being deployed or what they'll be doing, but many will still welcome the support, coming after months of deliberation, although some, including Mozambique's president, seemed resistant. Ultimately, we just have to hope that the conflict will come to an end and save lives across the region. You might assume that the Environment Minister of Brazil, a country which is home to the world's biggest rainforest, would be working hard to defend their country's nature. But it seems maybe not. Ricardo Salles was forced to resign last week following a police investigation into an illegal wood smuggling ring, which Salles apparently had some involvement in. Unfortunately, this news will be unsurprising for many, with President Bolsonaro and his government seemingly unconcerned about environmental issues, with Amazon deforestation increasing by 40% since Salles took his position. Something that's unlikely to change in the near future, with his replacement having ties to Brazil's farming lobby. Speaking of Bolsonaro, let's address his friend to the north, Donald Trump. He might not be as newsworthy as he was a few months ago, on account of the fact he's not president anymore, but, well, maybe that's about to change. Over the weekend, the former president held his first rally since leaving the Oval, with him describing the Ohio rally as the first rally of the 2022 election. During the speech, Trump reiterated his unproven and discredited claims that the 2020 election had been rigged, before laying into his successor, remarking that Biden puts America last, we put America first. It's very simple. Very, very simple. Speaking about the potential of a 2024 run, Trump yet again didn't rule it out, saying incorrectly, we won the election twice, before adding, and it's possible we will have to win it a third time. It's possible. Moving back to Europe, a British ship angered the Russians on Wednesday when it sailed into Crimean waters, territory which is claimed by both Ukraine and Russia. Russia described this as a provocation from Britain, but with the UK and most of the world supporting the Ukrainian claim, they retorted that they were just sailing through Ukrainian waters, something they had permission to do. Anyway, we covered this dispute in another video, linked below, but the story got more interesting on Sunday, when a confidential British report leaked showing that Britain suspected the passage would anger the Russians before they even conducted it, adding credence to the common belief that Britain was intentionally sending a message to Putin. This is clearly interesting because it shows a marked shift in strategy from the UK, who has a difficult relationship with Russia. What's more crazy though is how this information was leaked, because the documents revealing this were just found at a bus stop in Kent. The British Ministry of Defence are supposedly investigating the incident, but with the 50 soggy papers shared with the BBC by the person who found them, well, it's a little too late to take them back now. Finally, you might be familiar with Hungary's new anti-LGBTQ+ laws, which Viktor Orban introduced earlier in the month, before receiving condemnation from fellow European nations. Under these new rules, it's against the law to promote homosexuality or sex reassignment in educational material. Any advertisement containing LGBT content would also be restricted, and only government-registered organisations will be able to provide such education. Criticism from European leaders came in hard at an EU summit held on Friday though, with the Dutch Prime Minister remarking that Hungary must repeal its anti-LGBTQ+ law or they must leave the EU. What do you think though? Should Hungary be pushed out, or is it potentially more damaging to have them outside the club? There's a full video on the TLDR EU channel about this dispute, so click the link to find out more. Anyway, those were some of the biggest global news stories from the last week, and if 8 minutes wasn't enough for you, then there's links to further reading in the description. If you think we missed anything, then comment below the stories you'd like to see us cover in future episodes. As always, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a new video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that is in the description.